This is draft season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Football Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. Hello, everybody. It is our final draft season before the 2025 NFL Draft. I am John Schmeelk. This is Tony Pauline. He's from Sportskeeda, of course. We are recording this just so we set our times here in case any news breaks at 3:15 on Tuesday afternoon. It'll post on Wednesday on all of the Giants' normal platforms, as well as the Giants' YouTube channel, giants.com/podcast, the Giants app. So if any news happens between this and when it posts and it's not recorded, that's why. Tony, your final mock draft is going up Wednesday night. So what we're doing today, we're going to go back and forth on all of these picks. My guess is that we're going to be able to come to a pretty good consensus on a lot of them. On other ones, we'll have debates on. And this will serve as the final draft season mock. But Tony is going to join us on our live show on WFAN on Wednesday night in the 8 o'clock hour between 8 and 9 p.m. And by then, his final mock will be over. So we'll get Tony's latest intel on that show. If you want to get to the up to the second Tony Pauline knowledge and facts going into the 2025 NFL Draft. Tony, how are you, man? Hope you're doing okay.
Yeah, a little exhausting. I mean, I'll be happy when it finally gets here. You're
And me
trying
too.
to figure out what's real and what isn't. You hear everything and anything this past couple of days, or at least I have, and then you got to try and slim it down and go with the best sources
How do you sort through fact or fiction?
based on past history. I had people call me up and say this is going to happen, and I just know it's outrageous and there's no chance of it's happening. And then I look at people that I've spoken to that have been very right on the money in the past.
And usually you're not getting, I mean, I'm not trying to bust your sources up, but my sense from talking to people that do this like you, a lot of times you're not going to have a team tell you what they're going to do, but somebody else might have insight into what another team's going to do, and then they'll kind of pass that on to you. Is that kind of how this works a lot of the time?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, the teams may let information out very late in the process, but at this point in time, more than 48 hours before the first round begins, it's very unusual. That their draft plans out. As we'll get into it, there are some things I know about certain people in the room or in the front office that they like. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the final decision.
Perfect. All right, so let's get to it here, Tony. We'll go through the entire first round, then at the end, I'll get you an idea for the Giant fans that watch this, what the Giants might do at pick number 34. So we'll start with the Tennessee Titans. Mike Borgonzi, I think he had a presser on Tuesday rather, said, I'm not trading the pick. And I think we can pretty much etch this one in stone that it's going to be Cam Ward out of Miami.
And it's been that way for a while. I mean, since the combine, I was reporting that Tennessee liked them. They dangled the pick out there as you would expect them to do. But it's a brand new regime. They need a quarterback. You're starting fresh. Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this draft. He's had a terrific season in 2024, really elevated his draft stock. Still needs some work. This pick checks off a lot of boxes.
100% agree. Cleveland Browns, I've been told from a buddy of mine that covers the Browns, you can write it down in pen, Travis Hunter at number 2.
Again, makes sense. They're not going to take a quarterback. They need immediate impact from whatever player they draft in the early rounds. Hunter, I mean, what'll be interesting is to see how they use him. He's made statements. I'm going to be used both ways, or I'm not playing. Is he going to be used primarily as a wide receiver, which I have always seen him as,
And that's
and
what the
then use it?
Browns apparently see him as too, right? They've
Yeah,
said they see him as a wideout.
right. And it's kind of ironic because a lot of people said all along he was going to be a cornerback, and I just thought there was too much risk putting him at cornerback, and then maybe they sprinkle him on the field in dime packages.
All right, pick number 3 to the New York Giants, Tony. This seems to be one of the pivot points of this draft. What have you been hearing about what the Giants might do at 3?
Not a quarterback. I think it's going to be Abdul Carter. Obviously, there's some things medically that Abdul Carter they want to check off on. He's a guy that's going to give immediate impact to the team on the field in week one. As I've said time and time again, it's a quarterback crazy league now, but 20, 25 years ago, everybody who was selecting at the top of the draft, wanted the impact defensive player, and that's what Abdul Carter absolutely is.
Is anyone telling you quarterback for the Giants at 3, Tony, or is that kind of off the board at this point completely?
Some people have said it to me, but the way it's been presented and the reasoning makes no sense at all. They have that has been thrown out there, but when I dive into it further and ask some in-depth questions, it just makes no sense.
So now and we'll get to more of the details as it's the 34. Do you sense the Giants might be willing to pick a quarterback later in this draft? Do you think they're out on quarterback completely?
No, I think that they will look quarterback day two, unless in the second round there's just such a higher rated player at a position of need that they can't bypass. I do think that they'll look quarterback in the second round.
Okay, and we'll get more into that when we get to the end of this first round mock. New England Patriots at number 4. I'm sure they would have liked to get either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, Tony,
Yeah.
but the bottom line is that they need pieces to help Drake May, their quarterback, whether it's an offensive tackle or a wide receiver. What are you hearing they do here at number 4? I would think Will Campbell.
Right. I mean, yes, absolutely. They would love Travis Hunter. I'm very unlikely he's going to be there unless they make a trade up to get him. I mean, you say Will Campbell. I mean, that makes sense because he's the purest left tackle in this draft, although some people like Armand Membo better as a prospect. I've been reporting the past couple of days they could throw a curveball. There is a feeling out there they could throw a curveball and take Jalen Walker. And you gotta look at who the head coach is, Mike Vrabel.
Wow.
I don't think that's off the table. But I think when all is said and done, from what I've heard just a couple hours before where we taped the show, it looks like Will Campbell.
Jalen Walker, that would be interesting twist there. Picking a defensive player. All right, Jaguars at number 5, Tony. We've talked about an offensive lineman here. We talked about a defensive lineman here. Heck, back in the day, we talked about a defensive back here before, the Michigan corner kind of got pushed down. Will Johnson got pushed down boards a little bit. The thing I'm hearing recently, and I've heard it from way too many people to think this is smoke, that this is going to be Ashton Genty's landing spot at number 5.
You said that to me yesterday, and I did a little bit of investigating, and people have said to me that many in the Jaguars front office believe that Genty is the missing piece to that offense. That's debatable. I would go with one of the linemen, whether it be Mason Graham or Armand Membo. But everything since you told me that it looks like it's going to be Genty seems it's going to be trending that way. And,
Okay.
That's what teams are talking about, potentially trading up ahead of Jacksonville to get Genty.
Wow. And that would be the Patriots, I would assume, in getting out of 4, right? Figuring they can get that offensive lineman a little bit later.
Potentially. I mean, there's reports that the Giants and the Cleveland Browns are fielding trade offers. And we'll talk about that for a second.
Yeah, please.
You're sitting there at 2 and 3. Unless there is a must-have player, you've got to go, through the process and see, what you can get for that pick. How far down would you move to still get a player that you want, and what you can get in return for that selection?
Now, you probably wouldn't be able to get the usual gigantic haul, though, right? Because teams are not trading up for a quarterback.
You shouldn't. I mean, there's some talk that San Francisco wants to move up to get one of the edge rushers. So if they want to get in front of Carolina, or they want to, for Mikael Williams, so they want to make a big move up to get Jalen Walker. I mean, and they have 11 picks, and they don't have a lot of room on their roster for 11 players. Although they did lose a bunch of players in free agency, they made some surprising cuts. But you never know. I mean, some teams are just so stuck on one player, they're willing to overpay to move up.
I guess I'll put this to you a basic way. If the Giants decide, all right, we'll move out of 3. We actually had a phone call on Big Blue Kickoff Live about this on Tuesday. So I'll pose the question that the caller posed to us. And this was his theory. Do you think the Giants, if they slide from 3 to 11 with the Niners, could get the Niners first round pick next year in that type of trade, or no?
For 8 slots,
I thought it was a little rich myself, to be honest with you.
I mean, the move to move up and get Trey Lance, I believe, was into the middle of the first round, and they got the following. I do think that's a bit much, but the Giants may not want that. They may want a bunch of day 2 selections.
Right. That's true. And this is a really good draft on day 2. So I think that's very possible. No, I'm with you. And I think that could help them fill out the roster and make it a lot easier if they want to move back into the first round for a quarterback to have extra capital for that too. Or maybe they would just then pick the quarterback at 11 if they move down to 11. So it could give the Giants a lot of different options if that's something that they would consider. All right. Las Vegas Raiders at pick number 6, Tony. What are you hearing about what they might do at pick number 6? They need a wide receiver. They could use offensive linemen. They could use a corner. They could have used a running back as well with Genty.
Right.
A lot of options here. I think the Raiders have a lot of work to do on their roster. What do you think, Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, Spytek, and all those guys that do there in Las Vegas?
The offensive lineman makes sense, especially with Spy Tech there, as I wrote last week at Sportskeeda when I heard Membo was in the conversation for this selection. Spy Tech has had a lot of success when he was with Tampa Bay with Tristan Wirfs. You look at that offensive line, it's primary in Tampa Bay. It's primarily been first and second rounders. I think that Membo is definitely in the conversation here, as would be Genti if he's available.
I've heard
But I
Kelvin
think
Banks is a player that the Raiders might be big fans of.
Well, I'm gonna throw a curveball here, and I'm gonna say that they take Mason Graham
Okay.
because yeah, they need a pass rush, but they also need help on the defensive line, and I think Mason Graham can kind of do both things. Granted, he's not an edge rusher, but I think Mason Graham on the inside helps the pass rush for that team.
And look, you can have a real dominant unit, right? If you have Mason Crosby healthy, you have Christian Wilkins healthy, and then you have they have the who's the little guy on the outside that they just re-signed this year. They have another good defensive end, a veteran that came back, Malcolm Kuntz. That's right.
From
Uh,
Buffalo,
yeah.
from the
So
University of Buffalo.
so you have those four guys on that defensive front. That could be a real strength of that team if they go Mason Graham. And I think he's probably the next best player on the board. So that makes sense. All right, Mason Graham to the Raiders at 6, Tony. New York Jets at number 7, and this leaves the window open for Armand Membo to be the twin tackle protectors with Olu Fashanu for whomever ends up becoming the Jets' long-term quarterback answer.
Yeah, I'm told that the love for Tyler Warren is real for the Jets, but in past days, they've been doing a lot of work on Armand Membo, a lot of work. They need a right tackle. You mentioned Fashano. I mean, you got to protect Justin Fields. That offensive line has really been a mess. Although, if you add Membo, it's another younger piece with Tittman, with Oliviera Tucker, and hopefully Fashano picks his game up. So I think Membo, who has got tremendous upside, is the pick here. There are concerns about his maturity. Not that he acts like a child, but that he's just a younger guy and he's going to need some time to develop. That's understandable, but his upside is incredible. And you could be getting just an absolute home run pick at right tackle with Membo. I love his playing style. May take some adjustment, but he's a good player now who I think has got incredible potential. So I think Membo here for the Jets.
Yeah, and look, I think you can get a tight end later in the draft, right? There's
Yeah.
such a good tight end class, Tony. You get a tight end on day 2. You're not going to get an offensive tackle on day 2, though. That's going to be anything near what Armand Membo is. So I'm with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. Membo to the Jets at 7. All right, let's recap here. First 7 picks. Cam Ward to the Titans, Travis Hunter to the Browns, Abdul Carter to the Giants, a lot of chalk. Will Campbell to the Patriots, Ashton Genty to the Jaguars, Mason Graham to the Raiders, Armand Membo to the Jets at number 7. Carolina Panthers at number 8, Tony. This is one of those wild card picks to me because I think they have a lot of needs. They could use another weapon for Bryce Young. I think they desperately need defensive front help, rushing the passer on defense, and they could use a corner. I, for one, here would focus on the defensive front. I just don't know which guy to pick. This is where it gets really dicey from team to team. Which is the next edge or defensive lineman off the board?
Well, in my opinion, it's Jalen Walker. And I know that they like Michael Williams, the Mikel Williams from Georgia. They like him a lot. But I think Jalen Walker is so much higher rated. Evidently, he's done a great job with his interviews. I think the versatility of Walker to be used up at the line, up the field, or in reverse in space and make plays in coverage. Doesn't have the great growth potential at 6'1". There were some concerns. How much heavier, how much more weight can he get? How much more bulk and strength can he add? But he's definitely the much higher rated player. And if he's there, I think they take him over Williams.
All right, I'm with you. Jalen Walker to the Panthers at number 8. I think Michael Williams is also an interesting name there to keep an eye on. In terms of defensive front, as I look at some of these other guys that might be available, I think those would probably be the next group. I'm a big Derek Harmon fan. I don't think other people are going to be as high on him as I am. I've heard Tony with him, and we could talk about this when we pick him, I guess. Are there late medical concerns
Yep.
with him? I've heard whispered around.
I was told yesterday that there's a lot of medical issues, and if it weren't for the medical issues, he would be a lock top 12 pick. So
Mm.
there are some concerns about Harmon's And I guess it's a lot of little things over the course of time.
Interesting. So not one major thing. I'm with you. And I think and I don't know how teams. I'm not as high on him, but I guess Walter Nolan can start being in the conversation here too, as a defensive tackle pick. All right, Saints at number 9, Tony. I would think they would be considering quarterback here with Shador still on the board, but everything that I'm hearing is that they're not. So what are you hearing the Saints might do? Where they're always in the search for some pass rushers as well. And if you go by what the type of players they've drafted before, this smells like a Michael Williams destination to me. But you tell me.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they take a quarterback here. I mean, there's talk about them potentially trading for Kirk Cousins. People say, well, Atlanta won't trade within in the division, but if New Orleans is willing to pick up the lion's share of that $27 million, Falcons would probably ship them off to a place like New Orleans. We've never even heard a definitive statement as far as Derek Carr's shoulder is concerned for 2025.
Yep.
You mentioned pass rushers. They seem to always go on the lines of scrimmage. Offensive line, it's still a mess, even though they've used so many picks on the offensive line, even defensive line. I'm going to throw a curveball here. I'm going to say it's going to be Tyler Warren, the tight end out of
Ooh.
Penn State. There's a lot of love for him for picks 7 with the Jets, 9 with the Saints, and 10 with the Bears. They wanted Brock Bowers last year. They lost out on him. So I think the Saints, who need help at tight end, look towards Tyler Warren.
Any consideration of Kelvin Banks here, Tony? Ryan Ramczyk just announced his retirement. They could use help on the offensive front at tackle. Was that a consideration for you here? He'd be the next tackle up more likely than not, right?
It is, but you look at their offensive line right now, right? They went first round last year with
Yep.
Fuega. They went first round in 2022 with Trevor Penning. They went first round in 2020. So it looks like every even year, it's when they go with they take a offensive lineman in the first round. It's a matter of you just got to you have to deal the cards that you're dealt with. You continually use early draft capital on offensive linemen and you don't hit on them, you eventually create holes everywhere else, which is what's happening. You look at the tight end Forster Moreau. They did sign Juwan Johnson and re-sign him in free agency, but I think it needs a major upgrade, that position.
All right, now you go to the Chicago Bears, Tony. I think this is another if Genty's there, I think this could be a pick of Genty if he's on the
Yep.
board. I think both of us at this point will be shocked if he was still on the board when the Bears selected number 10. So I think this has to be either an offensive tackle or a defensive lineman. It's just a question of which guy it's going to be, right?
Yeah, I've been told that they're looking for that offensive guard, offensive tackle combo. A guy that they may be able to start at guard and kick out to tackle,
So
vice
that sounds like
versa.
Kelvin Banks, right?
Kelvin Banks, I think the sneaky pick here, or the surprise pick here, would be Josh Connerly, from what I'm hearing.
Okay.
But for the purposes of our mock draft, I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks.
I think that makes sense. Oh, so you're hearing a lot of love around the league for Connerly, maybe a little bit earlier than what other people think.
I'm told 10 to 25, and several people told me that the Bears really like him. They had he had a great visit there. They came away very impressed. Does it mean they're going to take him at 10? Well, it means that he's in the conversation at 10.
And I think he should be, Tony. I think he's a walk-in. I know he's got
I
play strength
agree.
issues. I think he's going to be a starting offensive tackle in this league for a very long time with his feet. So I'm with you on that. We talked about the 49ers, Tony. They could use an offensive tackle. They could use an edge rusher. They could use a defensive tackle. It's a trench draft. Where do you think they go here at pick number 11?
There's been talk about Walter Nolan going to the selection. I mean, they basically gave away their 2 starting defensive tackles. But I think if Michael Williams is there and
That's
available
a
to him, I think it's a tough player to pass up on. You look at his size, you look at his ability, you look at his upside potential. I mean, Williams is just starting to hit his stride as a football player, and he's got tremendous upside, as does Walter Nolan. But Nolan's got a few more question marks.
Okay, we'll go Michael Williams then to the Niners. I think that's a home run pick, and I think those would be the two guys they would be selecting between. All right, Dallas Cowboys number 12 here, Tony. Talking to people down in Dallas that I keep in touch with, this feels like a wide receiver pick. It's almost
Yep.
like a wide receiver or bust. The
Yep.
question is it Matthew Golden or is it Teteroa McMillan?
Go back to the Senior Bowl when I reported that the Cowboys were going to look receiver with their first pick because they desperately need a receiver. That's come to fruition. I personally like Tet McMillan, but I think it's going to be Matthew Golden, because they want a speed guy. Golden showed at the combine with the 4.29. He is a speed guy that can stretch the field. Ran great routes at his pro day. He's got a terrific game with a large amount of upside. So I think he complements what the Cowboys already have on the roster at receiver. I like Ted McMillan, but I think it's going to be Golden.
Okay, I'm with you. I would pick Ted McMillan there too if I was Dallas, but I think Golden. He reminds me of like can't you see him having like a Jordan Addison type of impact? You put him across from a really good wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, and he's that same type of player.
A little bit faster than Jordan Addison, which is what
Yep.
the Cowboys want, more of a vertical threat.
Yeah, both good, really good route runners though. All right, let's go to the Dolphins at 13 here, Tony. Jalen Ramsey's on the trade block. There's a good chance by the time this even airs, he could get traded. Maybe it's draft night for a mid-round pick. Who knows? Do they have to pick a corner here?
Yes, but I think with the news about Will Johnson and from what I'm hearing with the injuries, I would be surprised if it was Will Johnson. I had
Well,
Will
what are you hearing
Johnson.
about that? Well,
Well,
tell us
I'm
first.
hearing there's a bunch. I hear there's knee issues. There's a bunch of different issues, which is going to push him down into the second half of round one because of that. I thought all along this pick had to be Will Johnson. Based on what I'm hearing, I think it's going to be a defensive tackle. Would it be Walter Nolan? Would it be Derek Harmon? I'm going to go with Walter Nolan. Harmon's got the injuries. Nolan has got tremendous upside. When he's on his game, he's shown himself to be a playmaker that can rush the passer, rush the quarterback, make plays behind the line of scrimmage, and disrupt the action. As does Harmon, but I like Nolan's upside and his growth potential a little better.
Any thought to Jade Barron there or Jade Barron? Pardon me.
In my opinion, it would be a need pick because while I like Barron, there are a lot of players, especially at defensive tackle, that are higher rated, not only on my board, but from people I've talked to around the league.
Okay, let's go to pick number 14 in Indianapolis Colts, Tony. Ty Warren's off the board, who's been a popular pick to the Colts here at 14.
Right?
Colston Loveland is still there. They could
Yeah.
also use a corner. They could use a guard. They can use an edge player. What are you thinking for the Colts here? In terms of best guys on the board, Kelvin Banks is gone. I mean, I think this is a little early for Tyler Booker, but I think, as a mauling downhill run game, I think he actually fits in that scheme pretty well. It's a little early for me. I would think about Colston Loveland in this spot. What
Yeah.
do you think they're thinking?
I thought all along this could also be a safety because they
Yep,
do need a safety. They
correct.
want an offensive lineman. The offensive linemen are off the board. Literally, just today, I'm told that the love for the tight end position is real with the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm going to go with Colston Loveland. They wanted to trade up for Brock Bowers a year ago.
Yep.
And when you look at the tight ends that are going in the first round this year, only two of them, Colston Loveland is more Brock Bowers than Tyler Warren with his ability to get down the field. You just have to be comfortable with that injury. So we're going to go Colston Loveland here.
I gotta tell you, man, whoever wins that starting quarterback job, Tony, they have Jonathan Taylor, they
Yep.
have Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell. Then you throw in Colston Loveland. That is one hell of a young weapon offensive group that's going to touch the ball, man. That is a really good group.
You just have to protect them, and you just have to hope that the Chris Ballard quarterback jinx, ends because Ballard has done a real good job at most of the positions. He just can't get the quarterback position straight.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. All right, let's go to the Falcons at 15, who are still looking for pass rushers, though they have needs elsewhere. I got to imagine it's got to be a guy up front on defense here, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons could potentially trade down from this spot, from what I'm hearing, because they only have a limited number of selections.
Yep.
Trade down. This is the area where, for a lot of teams, there are no longer any more true first rounders. I'm told like the Buffalo Bills only have 12 players with first round grades on their board. So this is the area where you might start to see some trades. Uh, this is also the area we're gonna start to see those that second tier of pass rushers come off the board. I'm going to stay with what I've heard, and I'm going to stay with being stubborn, and I'm going to go with James Pierce of Tennessee, who, from what I heard after post-draft meetings, has moved ahead of Michael Green on a number of boards.
Really? That's interesting. All right, you're gonna stick to your guns with James Pierce at 15 to the Falcons. I would pick Mike Green there. Again, I don't know the off-field stuff with him. That's something that we obviously don't, we've heard what the reports are. but
Right.
we're not, detailed into those cases. But Pierce to 15 to the Falcons. Any thoughts of Shamar Stewart there, Tony, or no?
It's still too early. I mean, we've talked about Shamar Stewart all along. 1.5 sacks last year, 4.5 sacks throughout his college career. But an amazing athlete. I've mentioned a couple of times people have compared him to Vernon Gholston, the former New York Jets first round bust. There are some teams that project him as a top 15 pick. I think when all is said and done, he's probably going to go later in round one.
All right, Arizona Cardinals at 16 here, Tony. This could be another back-to-back edge situation.
Could be, or it could be a defensive tackle. I
Yep.
mean, do they take a Michael Green here? I think here you're probably going to see where Derek Harmon ends up. That's where he goes. A playmaker, a guy who can play on the 3-man line. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism. It could be an edge rusher, but from what I'm hearing, it's also could also be an interior defensive lineman, like it was last year.
Yeah, I should have just said pass rusher. Positions really doesn't matter, right? They just need guys up front that can get after the quarterback, something they sorely missed last year. All right, Cincinnati Bengals at 17, Tony. We will get to them in just a second, but first, a reminder that draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risk into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, Bengals were at the halfway point, Tony. Pick number 17. Look, I mean, they just need defense, Tony. They lost scoring 30 points like almost like 3 or 4 times last year. They can score. I know they could use another offensive lineman, but you got to just pick the best defensive player here, don't you?
You would think so. I mean, but would they go with a Kenneth Grant? Would they take a Michael Green? I mean, they've told Trey Henderson to search out a trade, and at the very worst, you're probably not going to have Trey Henderson after the 2025 season. So I'm going to go with Michael Green here.
And the Bengals, by the way, have been known to take chances on guys with some off the field things. You go back to Burton last year, just as an example. So something to keep an eye on moving forward. I like that pick. All right, Seattle Seahawks at 18, Tony. They could use some help on the offensive line. They trade away DK Metcalf, receiver, maybe a tight end.
Yeah, I'm told that they really like Gray Zabel of North Dakota State, college tackle who projects on the inside. Some people think guard. Some people think he will eventually develop into a center. Whether they take him at 18 or whether they try and move down a little bit further and take him, I think that from what I've heard, that's going to be their guy. I have Josh Connolly rated slightly higher than Gray Zabel, but from what I've heard, Seattle likes Gray Zabel.
Yeah, so do I. I'm with you on that. All right, the Bucks at number 19, Tony. They could use some pass rush too.
They can use some pass rush, but they can also use a safety. So the question
Yep.
is it Nick Emanawari or is it Malachi Starks? I'm going to go with Starks, even though I have Emanawari rated much higher because I think he's much more a Todd Bowles player, fits the system. You can line him up over the slot receiver. He's more of a true center fielder. Edge rusher is a possibility, but again, we talked about the Saints and how they've expended so much draft capital on offensive linemen. It's been kind of the same thing with the Bucks, and they really haven't been able to hit. They did sign Hassan Reddick in the offseason, and I think Hassan Reddick's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. So I think with this pick, I'm going to go Malachi Starks.
All right, and then we have the Broncos at 20 here, Tony. This smells like running back all day to me with Omari and Hampton. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, it could be Omari and Hampton, but I'm going to go with Ted McMillan. Now, people say, well, they need a guy to stretch the field, and they would rather have Matthew Golden, but Matthew Golden's off the board. It's going to be an offensive skill player. It could be Omarion Hampton, but I also think getting another target for Bo Nix, especially in a draft, as we talked about just a little while ago, is so rich at running back. You can pass on Hampton and get another running back, second, third, fourth round. That could be a good player for you. I think getting a real good target, another target in there, another set of hands for Bo Nix is important. And really, McMillan, as far as I'm concerned, is major value at this point.
Any thought here to McMillan and Sutton? I agree, it's great value. Being a bit duplicative with both guys being kind of big-bodied outside receivers.
Absolutely is. That's why they want more of a speed guy. That's why they would relish Matthew Golden falling down. And you're absolutely right. But remember, Sutton's got what I believe is 1 year left on his contract. I reported on that. It's not turmoil. They would like to extend them. You don't know what's going to happen with Cam Sutton after the season.
All right, let's go to pick number 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Tone. Everyone just assumes they're picking a quarterback here. I don't know. Steelers run the organization a particular way. If they don't believe the quarterback's good enough, I don't think they're going to force the pick, but Shador Sanders is still there. They could also go for a defensive tackle. Cam Hayward's getting a little bit older. They lost Najee Harris. They could pick a running back here. What are your thoughts on
Yep.
the Steelers?
Could be a Marion Hampton, could be Kenneth Grant, but I think it's going to be Shador Sanders. As I reported at Sportskeeda literally the past week, I've been told that Mike Tomlin is in favor of Shador Sanders. I've been told that, Deion Sanders would go easier on Mike Tomlin when Shador Sanders hits bumps in the road compared to other coaches. I've also been told that they are very happy, or at least Mike Tomlin is very happy, or at least okay, moving into the season with Mason Rudolph. So you start Mason Rudolph, you have Shador Sanders sit behind him. No reason to start Shador Sanders from week one, which would be a mistake in my opinion. I think this is where Shador Sanders finally comes off the board.
All right, that's 21. Two quarterbacks off the board now in Cam Ward and Shador Sanders. Any thought to a team trying, and well, let me ask you this. Any thought to the Steelers moving back here, Tony? They don't have a second round pick to try to pick up extra draft capital. Let me start there.
I mean, if the right offer is there, I'm sure they would move back. I'm sure they would also be happy with Jackson Dart later on. But again, from what I'm told, Tomlin would like Shador Sanders. You know, I guess it's a roll of the dice how far back you can move and still get Shador Sanders, assuming that none of those teams at the top of round two make a move up to get the quarterback.
Well, that was my second question. How likely do you think that would be that a team like the Browns, the Saints, the Giants could try to move ahead of the Steelers at 20 or 19 to pick a quarterback?
The Raiders as well. I mean, the Raiders need a quarterback for the future.
Yep.
I guess it would all depend on the asking price. Again, it's kind of interesting. I don't think the asking price would be that high. Go back to what I said before. There are teams that only have 12, 13, 14 players with first round grades. So at this point in the draft, when you're in the 20s, you're basically drafting players with second round grades
Yep.
at the end of round one. So the asking price may not be all that high for a team, that wants to move down. You talked about Pittsburgh. We'll talk about the team selecting after Pittsburgh to get to move down so a team can move back up and get Shador Sanders.
All right, then we have the Los Angeles Chargers at 22, Tony. They could use help on the defensive line for sure. They could use a weapon on offense to help Justin Herbert and Lad McConkey. Where do you think they go?
I had heard that they would consider Marion Hampton at this point because they only signed Najee Harris to a 1-year deal. I know they'd love to have Colston Loveland because they need a tight end. Edge rusher would be a consideration here. They do need a receiver, so I think right here this is an excellent range for Emeka Egbuka. I do
Ooh.
know that the Packers like him. I think the Packers would take him there at 23. But I think right now, the way it stands, do they take on Marion Hampton for the future with Najee Harris on a 1-year deal? I think they take Colston Loveland, but he's off the board. They need receivers. I think Egbuka is the pick here.
All right, let's go to Packers at 23. Tony, you mentioned it. I could see them picking a receiver. We don't know if Marshawn Lattimore is going to be there that much longer. I'm not Marshawn Lattimore. Jair Alexander will be there much longer, pardon me. Kenny Clark's getting a little bit older. I can see them picking a big nose tackle, defensive tackle type, or an edge player, to be totally honest with you. Rashawn Gary did not have the best year last year coming off injury. So where are you going with the Packers here, aside from just picking the best player available?
Yeah, I think they would like Emeka Egbuka. I think the Packers, I'm told the Packers are going to try and move down. So this is another point in the draft where a team, could potentially move down. At this point in time right here, I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron, the cornerback. I think they would like a receiver. I think they prefer to move down. When all else fails, I think they go with the cornerback. Kenneth Grant, is he a good fit for that system? I don't know. I mean, there's no other edge rushers. Would they take Ezeraku at this point in time? I know most teams I've spoken with have second round grades on Ezeraku, so I think this is a little bit rich. I guess Shamar Stewart would have to be a consideration here, but I think Jahdae Barron fits a need and he's safer than most of those players I mentioned.
All right, let's go to the next selection. That is the Minnesota Vikings at 24, and this could be a prime trade down target here, right, Tony? They only have 4 picks in the draft. They have a lot of needs: edge, corner, safety on defense. I think this could be a prime trade down candidate if the Vikings can find a dance partner.
Absolutely. I mean, the question is a team trading up with Green Bay at 23, or are they going to trade up with Minnesota, or is there an opportunity for both of those teams to trade down? Completely agree with you. I wrote about it last week. Atlanta considering trading down, Minnesota looking to trade down. If they don't trade down, they're going to need a cornerback. Maxwell Hairston is flying up draft boards. Just about everyone I spoke to has a first round grade on him. So if they stay put, I think it's Maxwell Hairston.
And you thought the Wari here as a safety, where they also have a need.
It's got to be a consideration, but I think cornerback is a bit more pressing. And, like the New Orleans Saints with offensive linemen, the Vikings are, and even the Packers at a point in time, to a certain extent, at receiver, the Vikings always seem to be looking for a cornerback.
All right, let's go to the Houston Texans at 25, Tony. They could use an offensive lineman, but they could also use a receiver. Josh Connolly's still on the board. I'm not sure how you pass on him here.
Yeah, that's my pick. I mean, he's been mocked. I've had him mocked to the Texans the past 3 or 4 mocks that I've done. If he's there, I'd be shocked if they pass on him. If Abuka is there, that's also a possibility. But I think Connerly, especially with some of the offseason moves, makes the most sense.
All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Rams at 26 here, Tony. I think some people, and I don't think that's it's a bad idea. Think they could go quarterback, but I think they're trying to win with their window with Matthew Stafford. I think they love one of the big tight ends here. I think Mason Taylor could be a sneaky pick here at 26, the way people are talking about him moving up the boards. They could also use a corner. They don't like to pick corners. They could also use a linebacker. They don't like to pick linebackers. Where do you think the Rams here go at 26?
I thought potentially Jihad Campbell at this pick, but I'm hearing a lot of bad medical news on Jihad Taylor, specifically with his shoulders, which may interfere with his season in 2025 as a rookie. So, looking at the Rams, tight end, linebacker, cornerback, tough call right here. Very tough call right here. I'm going to go.
Hold on. So why don't we talk about it? Any tight end move the needle for you in this spot?
No, I can't see Arroyo or Mason Taylor being selected
Okay.
round one. I mean, it is the Rams, and you never know. And the funny thing with the Rams is for years they discarded the draft. Now they're back in the draft game, and they've done a terrific job of it. But still, at this point in time, the third tight end off of the board is a reach.
Okay. How about offensive line? Do you think this could be a Donovan Jackson landing spot here?
Donovan Jackson or maybe Tyler Booker. I mean, Booker is a guy who's big and strong. I have Booker rated slightly higher than Donovan Jackson. I do think that there's a possibility when I look at my Rams needs on my Rams board after corner, tight end, linebacker, it is offensive line. So I do think that Tyler Booker's got to be a consideration here.
All right. If he's
I
a
guess
consider, then who's the pick?
well, the other consideration would be, would they take Shavon Ravel here because of the upside? The pick for me would be Tyler Booker at this spot.
I think that's a good pick. I think it makes sense. Not a very sexy pick for the Rams, but I think that certainly makes a lot of sense with what they're doing there. All right, Baltimore Ravens at 27, Tony. This is one of the old. All right, let's see which really good player didn't get picked yet that's on the board for the Ravens to select. And my highest rated player left when I take a look at my board. Did Derek Harmon get picked yet?
Yeah, he did.
He
We
did.
had him
Okay.
go much earlier.
Uh, I mean, Josh Simmons would probably be the next highest guy. I could also see them taking a Jihad Campbell on defense. What do you think the Ravens are thinking here?
Well, I mean, you got Eminawari, who's available. They could use another safety, pair him with Kyle Hamilton. They can use an edge rusher and I'm told that they like the kid from UCLA, the linebacker from UCLA, Carson Swessinger, and maybe get their linebacker in round two. Shamar Stewart just screams Baltimore Ravens for me. I mean, the athleticism, they're able to develop those guys, the size. So I'm going to go with Shamar Stewart here.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, let's go to Detroit Lions at 28. I agree. I think edge is my number one need for them. I think they need one. And he kind of, they drafted Jason Oweh a few years ago. Same deal, had no sacks, but had a lot of physical ability. So I think it would be sticking with how they pick. I'm with you. All right, Detroit Lions at 28, Tony. I could see them as a sneaky trade down candidate too to pick up some more picks a little bit later in the draft. I got edge and then a nickel maybe, depending if they don't want to use Brian Branch as more of a traditional safety. What do you think the Lions do here at 28? I could see them going guard too,
Yep.
having lost Kevin Zeitler, or maybe this could be a Donovan Jackson landing place.
It's exactly where it is. I don't have Jackson as a first round prospect, but there aren't too many first round prospects, still on the board. But again, Donovan Jackson played tackle the last half of the season at Ohio State, did a good job, but he's not going to be a tackle on Sunday. I think Donovan Jackson did a great job or made a great decision after 2023, which was a subpar year for him, coming back for another season, and he's really elevated his draft stock. So I think here he makes a lot of sense for the Lions.
Okay, I'm with you. Commanders at 29. I could see this as another team, Tony, that could use a trade down. They traded some of their draft capital in the offseason. They acquired Debo Samuel, a couple other players as well. So I could see this as a potential trade down. And I think the Commanders still have a lot of needs, to be honest with you. They could use help at edge. They could use help at safety. They could use help at inside linebacker where they're getting older. Zach Ertz is long in the tooth. They could use a tight end, I think, a running back. Austin Eckler is their number two. How much longer is he going to be around? And then I believe their primary, Brian Robinson's heading towards the end of his rookie deal as well. So I think this is an interesting pick for the Commanders. I can see a trade down, but I think they probably got to pick a defensive player, no?
Well, I mean, who would the defensive player be? All the top edge rushers are off the board. Are they taking?
Ezra would be the guy that I would bring up in
I
that
know you, and I
conversation.
know you like Ezra. I guess he would be in consideration here, but again, I'm going to go back. Not too many teams I've spoken with have a first round grade on him.
Okay.
A lot of player you mentioned cornerback Siobhan Ravel. I mean, that's a consideration depending on when you think he's going to be back on the field. I'm going to go with Omarion Hampton because I think you just improve. You want Jaden Daniels to improve. You get him a stronger running game as well as a running back that can catch the ball out of the backfield, and that's Hampton.
Okay. I like it. All right.
Did I
Pick.
stun you? I think I stunned you there.
No, not at all. I had mentioned running back as a possibility next to Brian Robinson, so I have no problem with that. I just think that I think their defense was what kind of finished them last year. In the end, they couldn't get a stop when they needed it. So they have a nice set of weapons around Jaden Daniels, though, if they draft Marion Hampton, that's for sure. All right, let's go to pick number 30 to the Buffalo Bills. Tony, I can see them being a sneaky trade down spot, too. And I think they need to keep looking at the defensive side of the ball as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, they traded down last year, if you remember, at the very end. Um, Carson Swessinger is a consideration here. Jihad Campbell, although those injuries are a concern for me, they have a very leaky interior defensive line. So I'm
How
going to go
about
with
Kenneth Grant?
Kenneth Grant here to fix the problems on the defensive line.
Yeah, they're very small up the middle, Tony. So I could easily see Kenneth Grant being the big plugger at defensive tackle. You put him next to Ed Oliver. You got a nice little defensive front there. I think that makes sense. All right, Kansas City Chiefs at pick number 31. Offensive tackle is a continuing need. I think they could use an edge rusher. They could use a corner. Later on in the draft, maybe a Travis Kelce replacement down the road. What do you see for the Chiefs here at 31?
I think they're going to roll the dice with Josh Simmons. I mean, he's got a great amount of upside. I reported on Sportskeeda. There's a concern with Josh Simmons because he had a patella injury. He may not be able to play until the second half of the
Ooh.
2025 season. They did sign Jalen Moore in free agency, so he'll compete there. But as we saw at the Super Bowl last year, their offensive line is a mess. They traded Joe Thuney. You got to add more pieces there. You got to add more talent. You got to protect Patrick Mahomes. And I don't know if he's going to do that the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season. But Josh Simmons, with his upside as a pure left tackle, is their type of pick. And a year, halfway through the 2025 season, or even 2026, he can be a starter at left tackle.
Yep, I'm with you. I think that's a good pick for the Chiefs. They need a tackle desperately, and he has the ability to be a really, really good one. All right, Philadelphia Eagles, final pick at 32, Tony. They do let Chauncey Gardner-Johnson go this year. Could this be a Nick Emenwari spot? I, for one, think they're going to try to beef up their defensive front with a pass rusher, which is surprisingly, if you're not focusing on it, They've lost Fletcher Cox in that spot. They lost Hassan Reddick in that spot. They've lost Josh Sweat in that spot. They lost Milton Williams in that spot. I could see them trying to bolster their defensive front here.
Which is why I haven't taken Nick Scourton. And I'm told that teams like Scourton more than people on the outside. I'm getting very early second round grades on Scourton. This is the last pick of the first round. So, in essence, you can say it's an early second round pick. I know there's been some concern about Scourton's weight fluctuations, but as I report on Sportskeeda, Texas A&M had him playing too heavy at 285
Yep.
pounds. His playing weight is more 265, so he fits that scheme that the Eagles like in the up the field pass rusher.
All right, now let's get to the Giants at pick number 34, Tony. And they'll be impacted what the Browns do at 33. And we also know that at the top of the second round, with teams having a night to sleep on their boards, a lot of teams get very excited about a certain player or two that might be left, and they try to trade up into the front of that second round to get the player that they really want that's still maybe sitting out. As you know, some teams might still have a first round grade left on their board at this point. How do you think this plays out for the Giants at 33 and then their selection at 34 in terms of either picking a quarterback, moving around in the draft, or maybe doing something else altogether?
I think they'd like a cornerback. I don't know if Siobhan Revell is going to be available to them. Possibility. Like you said, do the Browns take Jackson Dart? For some reason, I know that they've liked Tyler Shuck through most of this process. There is some people out there who believe Tyler Shuck could ultimately, I should say, be the second quarterback selected ahead of Shedeur Sanders. I think the appeal for Shuck is a lot of teams feel that after Cam Ward, he's the most NFL ready quarterback. He's a guy that's going to be on the field sooner, being able to play. I'm going to go with the information I have, and I'm going to say it's going to be Tyler Shuck. If it were me, I'd probably would lean more towards a Siobhan Revell, maybe an interior offensive lineman or an offensive lineman like Savanea or maybe Ursery, somebody like that. But from what I hear, and maybe even a Trey Amos at this point, though he does have some injury concerns. But from what I hear, or what people have been feeding for me and what I've seen, I think a very good chance the pick here would be Tyler Shuck.
Really, for the Giants at 34, that's interesting. What do you
I
think the
guess
Bro-
I, I guess you don't agree with it.
No, I love Tyler Shook. I think he's awesome. I was just surprised that's where you went. All right, let me attack that in two different ways. One, I'm surprised corner is something you mentioned, given they signed Paulson and Debo to that big contract. You still hear the Giants are after a day two corner?
Potentially, yes.
Interesting. Okay. Where have you heard teams have Jalen Milroe in this mix?
I mean, I would be surprised if Jalen Milroe is a first round pick. Somebody did say to me, listen, if Anthony Richardson could be the fourth selection of the draft, then Jalen Milroe should easily be a first round pick. But, he did not play like a first rounder the second half of the year or the Senior Bowl or the Combine. I think in my mock draft, my last mock draft, I had Milroe going to the Raiders with the 37th selection. So if he's not a late first round pick, I think he's going to be off the board early in round two.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. What do you think the Browns do with 33? Who's their second quarterback if they don't get, or who's their third quarterback if they don't get Cam Ward and they don't get Shador Sanders?
I think it'll be Jackson Dart. I think he's a good fit for that system. And I think with signing Joe Flacco, it gives them some leeway in the sense that if you draft Jackson Dart, excuse me, at the top of round two, you're not going to need him to play for a while because Flacco's been a proven winner in Cleveland and he can learn behind a veteran like Flacco. I think it's a perfect situation for him.
What's the chance either the Giants or the Browns or a team like the Saints or the Jets, you mentioned them too, right? Of them trading back into the first round to leapfrog the Browns to get that third quarterback.
Yeah, I mentioned the Raiders as one of those teams.
The Raiders, sorry, yes.
I would be surprised because Cleveland and the Giants need players. They need players who can, play in 2025. Granted, I don't know that those players are Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck. I think it sets them up for the future. So I think a lot of those teams, maybe the Raiders would be the most open to it, but teams at the top of round two, I don't know that they want to be expending draft capital, to get a quarterback.
Are teams going to be hesitant to move round two and round three picks this year, Tony, because it's such a strong draft in that area of the picks?
You always get a good amount of movement in those areas. Remember, it's also going to be a strong day three. So if you can move down and get some extra selections in the fourth round, I know it doesn't sound sexy, doesn't sound attractive, but you're going to have good players through day three of the draft. It's all based on what the package that they're offered and what players are available. If they're in love with a player that's available on the board, I don't think they would move down.
That's interesting. All right, who are the best players you have left on your board here, Tony, after our 32 picks? And I'll list them very quickly to the fans if they're like, wait a second, why didn't you mention that guy? Cam Ward first, Travis Hunter second, Abdul Carter third, Will Campbell fourth, Genty fifth, Graham sixth, Membo, Jalen Walker, Tyler Warren, Kelvin Banks, Michael Williams, Matthew Golden, Walter Nolan, Colston Loveland, James Pierce, Derek Harmon, Mike Green, Gray Zabel, Malachi Starks, Tet McMillan, Shador Sanders, Emeka Egbuka, Jade Barron, Maxwell Hairston, Josh Connolly, Tyler Booker, Shamar Stewart, Donovan Jackson, Amarian Hampton, Kenneth Grant, Josh Simmons, and Nick Scorton. Those are the 32. Who are your
Right.
best guys left on your board, Tony?
It would be Nick Emenawari, who I think could end up in the first round, no doubt about it. I mean, the big safety from South Carolina. I had him going to the Colts for the longest time, but I'm told the Colts very likely to go tight end, so I don't know where he fits afterwards. Like I said, I think Malachi Starks is a much better fit in Todd Bowles' Tampa Bay defense. Jahad Campbell, who I had going through the first round, through most of my mock drafts, he could still end up as a late first round pick. But as I mentioned, red flags because of injuries, specifically shoulder injuries, which could complicate his rookie season. And then Luther Burden. I mean, I really want to put Luther Burden in the first round, but I don't know where he would fit late in the first round. Obviously, a guy that was liked a lot more in, as Jim Nagy would say, Twitter draft world than he was in NFL war rooms.
All right, my top guys I have left are Jahad Campbell, to your point, Tony. Carson Schlesinger is a guy that I have a little bit lower. I know a lot of NFL teams like him. Jade Barron did not get selected in our draft, right?
No, he did.
Oh, he did get picked.
Yeah, we
You're
had
right, he did
him.
get picked.
We had
Yeah,
him.
23 to the Packers. You're right.
Right.
All right, so you can cross him off. Golden gone, Egbuka gone, Connolly gone, Will Johnson gone, Donovan Jackson, Gray Zabel all gone. Donovan Ezaraku would be a guy that I have
Yep.
high in my list. And then Nick Emenwari actually is my only guy left with like a first, second round combo grade. So actually, it's funny. And considering you made most of these picks, Tony, I know I had some input. Of my top 32 players on the board, the only ones that did not get selected were Nick Emenwari, Donovan Ezaraku, and Jahai Campbell. Those are the three guys that kind of fell outside that ended up not getting picked. So yeah, I mean I think we came up with a pretty good list here in terms of where these guys might go. Where are you kind of expecting maybe your biggest surprises as you look at the Thursday night, where you still have the most questions, where even you're not sure what's going to happen?
4 and 5. I mean, I've heard from multiple people the Patriots could pull a surprise and not go with an offensive tackle, which would shock me. And then 5 with Jacksonville. I mean, we thought it was going to be Mason Graham. We thought it could be Armand Membo, but there's been so much chatter about Ashton Genty lately. They're either throwing up the smoke screen of the century, or they're going to pull off a surprise and take Ashton Genty with that selection.
That could be trying to get teams to trade up too, right, Tony? The team wants him, try to get a team to move up a couple spots to grab him, and you pick up an extra third round pick for your trouble, right?
Could be, but I mean, would it be Jacksonville that trades down, or would it be the Patriots that trade down to get in front of Jacksonville to get Genty?
Yeah, it could be either one. To be honest with
Right.
you, I'm with you. So I think that'll be very very interesting. All right, Tony, just give me your final thoughts here. We're recording this little more than 48 hours before the start of the draft. It'll post about 36 hours before the draft. You tell me. Give me your final thoughts heading into day one of the 2025 draft as we've gone on this long journey together.
I think it's going to be interesting to see which players that we all expected to be first round picks fall out. I mean, we mentioned Jahad Campbell, and I mentioned why because of the injuries. We talked about Luther Burden. I think the Colts, where they selected 14, I'm hearing a lot of love for tight end. So it looks like Colston Loveland. I think that the three big stories, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to players, is Shador Sanders, Tyler Warren, and Shamar Stewart. Where do they end up? Are they going to be overdrafted? I mean, very good chance Tyler Warren ends up as a top 10 pick. To me, he's not a top 10 prospect. Shador Sanders, basically the Shador Sanders story has sucked all the oxygen out of the room the past month. But when you look at him, he's a nice prospect. He's not a great prospect. And Shamar Stewart, who potentially could be a great prospect, but he's just not a real good football player. How early is he going to go in the draft?
Tony, good stuff. Tell the folks what they expect out of you on Sportskeeda in the days leading up to the draft.
Yeah, a lot of breaking news, a lot of stories there. Try and get one up every day. I'm sure we'll have one Thursday before first round, Friday before day two, and a two, if not three round mock draft. You said Wednesday night, probably going to be Thursday morning.
Make sure you go check that out on Sportskeeda with Tony Pauline. Of course, if you want to hear him again, he'll be on WFN with us with our live Giants draft night preview show on Wednesday night. Paul and I will go from 7 to 8, and Tony Pauline will join us for the second half of the show from 8 to 9 on WFAN in New York. You can find it at 1019 FM, 660 AM. That 660 signal goes all the way to Ohio at night, so you guys can hear that a while away, or you can find us on the Odyssey app that night as well. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. Thanks for being with us through this journey of draft season. Don't worry, folks. We'll have a reaction on draft season on Thursday night after the draft. We're going to have a wrap-up show airing next Monday. And then our final episode before we take our little 3-month hiatus will be Tony's look ahead to the 2026 draft class. I believe he's already on that tape, ready to go and talk about those 2026 prospects. He's not, but neither am I, but that's okay. We'll be ready when we need to be. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. That's Draft Season presented by Moody's from the Sack and Sack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time.